On Business Incorporated today. Guinea's coup leader set to meet miners to discuss way forward for the economy. Transmission company in Zimbabwe begins 12-hour cuts. And South Africa deletes Seychelles from COVID-19 restricted countries. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Ini John Mekwa. Well, let's start with intraday market numbers. Bullish sentiment permeated major markets in Africa. A marginal gain in Nigeria as the all-share index gained 0.01%. A better outing for South Africa, though, as the JSE was up 0.71%, followed by EGX 30 of Egypt, which was in the green, up 0.46%. In Kenya, the market is closed but ended Friday's trading positive 0.09%. Investors in the Middle East were divided between positive and negative sentiments at intraday. The market was bearish in Abu Dhabi as the all-share index dipped 0.70%. Same with market in Dubai, which saw the index losing more than 0.20%. In other regions, investors found the market more appealing at intraday as both Saudi Arabia's Tadawul and Qatari's index added 0.08% and 0.05% respectively. We move to Europe now, where stocks advanced today with investors continuing to weigh up European Central Bank's latest policy decision and inflation data. The pan-European stock 600 climbed 0.5% in early trade, with oil and gas stocks adding 1.2% to lead gains, while retail stocks fell 0.5%. Well, we'll have Conrad joining us from Frankfurt to give us details. Hello, Conrad. Good to see you.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me back.
Great to have you back. Well, Conrad, the race for a new German government is on. Last night, Germany saw 2 of 3 TV discussions between the leading candidates. Would a Germany under a center-left chancellor be very different to that of center-right Chancellor Angela Merkel?
Of course, there's a lot of speculation to that answer, but what I can tell you is that Angela Merkel's government always had a reputation of being rather reactive to things and to events and to crises, instead of being proactive and looking at things, trying to prevent future crises. No, when a crisis came up, Merkel became her best. That's what often colleagues of the German Chancellor are saying. And many expect that Scholz too will have something of that, because of course governing today is often driven by events that we don't know about yet a month or two ahead. But that will occur and that will shape our discussions and of course the political finding of a political direction.
Yeah, and still ahead of the elections, Olaf Scholz, the Social Democrat, appears to be leading the race to be the next German chancellor. What do we know about his economic approach?
What we already know is that he is, when it comes to, or when it's really necessary, he is willing to spend money, taxpayers' money, which he did to keep the German economy afloat during the pandemic. We also know that Olaf Scholz is not a particular friend of tax cuts. On the contrary, he thinks that affluent people in the country should pay more so that our schools will be better equipped, our police will be better equipped, etc. Generally speaking, I think it's fair to say Scholz is a friend of active government, of a government that gets involved in business, that spends something on investments, so that climate change, that huge technological overhaul that we are all facing is really happening.
Well, I guess Germans have a lot to weigh making their decision during the election, which is in a couple of weeks. Well, it's always an inspiration when companies seek a listing at the stock exchange. What are the expectations for this week?
We have two companies planning to float this week. One is a spin-off of Continental, which is the German, maker of rubber tires and also delivering many different auto parts to car makers. Vitesco is the name of the spin-off that is going to IPO later this week. Lilium is the name of the other company. It's a Bavarian company. It produces air taxis, little aircraft that people can climb on or can also put some cargo on so that it can be lifted and transported to somewhere else. So far, Lilium doesn't make profit, but it's a growth story, and that's the reason probably why also Lilium is choosing the stock market of Nasdaq to have its IPO.
All right, so we wish them the best, and I will surely follow the story. Thank you so much, Conrad, and enjoy the rest of your day.
You're welcome.
So let's move over to the UK now. During business morning, Juliana noted that the FTSE was doing well. Well, we'll see how it's doing at intraday, as well as other stories. Joining us is Juliana from our London studios. Hello, Juliana. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Nene.
Yeah, so the Secretary General of the Trade Union Congress is asking the UK to be better prepared for future economic shocks. Is this just about COVID-19, or are there other shocks that UK should be expecting?
Gosh, I'm sure there are more shocks to come over the next couple of months. But Frances O'Grady, as you said, she's a TransUnion Congress General Secretary representing the vast majority of trade unions across the UK. And of course, it hasn't been a fantastic time for people in the UK. We talk a lot about the economic recovery, but we do know that almost 1 million people have lost their jobs. And during the union's annual meeting, she's really been trying to challenge Prime Minister Boris Johnson's levelling up strategy, saying, it's one thing to say you're levelling up, but are we looking at how we can mitigate against economic losses for future pandemics? We know climate change is a major issue. And also technology. Now, technology, as well as it bringing lots of innovation and creating new jobs, there are going to be job losses. So Chancellor Rishi Sunak puts it well when he talks about viable positions here in the UK. So as so many are being created, there are many being lost. And that's one of the main issues that a lot of union bosses and leaders are talking about. And she really is putting out a stern warning to Prime Minister Boris Johnson's Conservative government that, you can't just say one thing and do another. We really need to stop with the austerity cuts and start looking at ways that we can mitigate against these issues in the near future.
Yeah, I guess she's just trying to say, let's face the reality. Well, plans to introduce vaccine passports for access into nightclubs and large events in England has been ditched. Why is that?
Well, not ditched, actually. I just heard the Prime Minister speaking. He's been speaking to journalists on a meet and greet around the country. And now this has come over reports from the Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, where he did say that they would be pushing back against vaccine passports. This was a major issue of concern as soon as nightclubs and the remaining businesses that are kept locked up for about 18 months were open on July the 23rd. Within 24 hours, the Prime Minister was saying that if you wanted to enter a crowded venue and if you did want to enter a nightclub from October, you would have to prove that you had had 2 doses of vaccines. Of course, this received plenty of hard criticism, not just from hospitality bosses, but also from Conservative backbenchers. It does seem to have been reversed. But then again, this morning, Therese Coffey, who's the Work and Pensions Minister, she spoke to the media and said it hasn't entirely been scrapped. And we won't know exactly what the Conservative Party's strategy is for combating COVID-19 in the winter until tomorrow. Prime Minister Boris Johnson will be given an address in front of Parliament. Of course, we know there have been talks about whether or not there could be a circuit breaker break, lockdown, perhaps not for the entire country, but for when children go on their half-term break in October? Will this be increased to 2 weeks? What about mask wearing? Is mask wearing going to be scrapped? And then, of course, the topic of whether or not there will be vaccine passports will be brought up. So we don't know yet. We're all kind of in a wait and see mode, but we will be finding out tomorrow when the Prime Minister speaks. And of course, Innie, as always, I'll be giving you the update on that.
Yeah, we trust you and we're waiting for that. Well, early this morning when you spoke to Chimeze, you talked about the FTSE, the market being in the green. How is it at this time?
Still very much in the green at Interday. The leads have been led by house builders. The signs seem to show that the floating housing market doesn't seem to be sinking any time yet. The FTSE All-Share is up 0.68%. The FTSE 100 is up by 0.74%. And the domestic market, the FTSE 250, that's up by 0.36%. In the currencies market, the British pound is currently down 0.13% against the US dollar. Up, though, against the euro by 0.17% and also up against the Japanese yen by 0.05%. Worth mentioning that EasyJet, the low-frills carrier, is still very much down after rejecting that bid last week by the Hungarian airline carrier Wizz Air. Their shares were down by about 13%.
All right, Juliana, thank you so much for the updates and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Innie.
So let's move over to Asia now, where shares were mixed today with stocks in Hong Kong leading losses. Hong Kong listed shares of Alibaba dropped 4.23% following a Financial Times report that Beijing wants to break up an Ant Group's Alipay and force the creation of a separate loans app. Other Chinese tech stocks also declined, with Tencent falling 2.45%, while Meituan slipped 4.47%. The Hang Seng Tech Index dropped 2.27%. Chinese electric vehicle stocks fell after the country's industry minister said that consolidation in the sector is needed as there are too many electric vehicle makers in China. BYD dropped 2.14%, while XPeng slipped 2.3%. Meanwhile, Chinese property developer Soho China plunged 34.57% after a takeover deal by Blackstone Group fell through Friday. That Blackstone had decided not to go through with its $3 billion bid to buy the developer. Hong Kong's broader Hang Seng Index dropped 1.5% to finish the trading day at 25,813.81. Mainland Chinese stocks closed mixed, with Shanghai Composite up 0.33%, while the Shenzhen components declined to 14,705. In Japan, the Nikkei 225 edged 0.22% higher on the day to close at 30,447. Well, let's take a bit of African news now before we go on a break. In Zimbabwe, the electric transmission and distribution company has begun daily 12-hour power cuts, and that's because of limited generation at its thermal plant and repairs on the dam at Kariba Hydropower Station. The company is experiencing a power shortage due to generation constraints at the power station and limited imports and program of dam wall rehabilitation. The power shortfall is being managed through load shedding in order to balance the power supply available and connected load. Well, let's know what's going on at this time in Zimbabwe. And it's important to note that while the issue of power cuts may not be news in Africa, many countries in Africa, it is in Zimbabwe because it's normally a country with a steady power supply. But we have Privilege joining us now. He's a resident and a journalist in Harare, the Zimbabwean capital, to tell us what the situation is at this time. Hello, Privilege. Good afternoon.
Thank you for having me. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good to have you. Well, what's the situation now? Is it any better?
What is happening is that the load shedding is happening every day, and it depends on where you stay. It depends on where you work. So it's a revolving power cut program where either in the morning from 5 a.m. maybe to 2 p.m. in the afternoon, you don't have power. And then from 2 p.m. until 8 p.m. in the evening, you also don't have power in different sections of the country or neighborhood that you stay.
Are Zimbabweans embracing alternative power supply? I mean, I know you guys are used to kind of at least steady power on an average time. Is there alternative power supply that a lot of people are embracing at this time?
Yes, at household level, even at corporate level, there's a lot of investment in solar energy and renewables that is happening right now. At household level, people are investing into their own solar units to augment the power shortages. And you also find that companies have also caught up on the same wave. If you go to, say, big companies, some are now utilizing their rooftops for their factories to install power supply through the solar. So you find some are also investing in solar farms that are now also feeding into the grid to save the situation.
And what's the government saying? Do we have an idea how long this load shedding is going to take place, and then how are businesses coping with this?
There's not been any deadline or time frame to say the power shortages are going to stretch to this period. It's kind of indefinite until when the power utility brings back all the units that are down at the moment, like the Kariba Hydro power station, which is the biggest generator for the country, and then also the thermal power stations like your Wange thermal power stations. There's not been, a definite time period that they've said this will be better, because at the same time, farmers are also demanding power because there's been a lot of wheat that was put on the ground this year, and this period is the peak period where most of the wheat is coming to maturity. So the power utility is also trying to balance the scale when it comes to power supply.
Wow, not a good one there. We do hope that it's been sorted out on time, especially because of the farmers. You talk of food security. Thank you so much, Privilege, and enjoy the rest of your day. We'll take a break now. When we come back, we have other stories coming from the African continent. To stay with us is Business Incorporated on Channels Television. Welcome back. You're still watching Business Incorporated on Channels Television, where Guinea's coup leader, Mamadi Doumbouya, is set to meet socio-economic and political officials of the West African country as part of the transition after seizing power a week ago. The meetings will start with September 14 with leaders of political parties and religious groups before they extended to civil society organizations and representatives of diplomatic missions, while the meeting with mining companies is set for the 16th of September. Sessions with banks and insurance companies as well as trade unions will follow on the 17th of September. Well, last week, prices for aluminium ore from Guinea hit their highest in almost 18 months in top metals consuming as China's buyers freighted over the supply after the coup in Guinea. Guinea stands as #1 bauxite producing country of the world. What are the expectations from these meetings? And has the Guinean economy been impacted so far? We have Matt Kindiga, Associate Practice Lead, Sub-Sahara Africa with Front of View, joining us for that conversation. Hello, Matt. Good afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for having me on the show today.
Good to have you. Well, what are the expectations from these meetings that have been set aside for this week?
Yes, certainly. So they are quite significant because, crucially, what the junta leaders are trying to do is reassure both domestic investors and also domestic businesses and also international businesses, including mining companies. It wants to reassure mining investors especially they will be able to continue operating as usual. It also wants to minimize anxieties around potential rent-seeking activities that members of the military junta might want to pursue, because that would pose quite a threat to their activities there. but also crucially, the military junta is looking to legitimize itself or improve its legitimacy in the eyes of the world, especially the African Union, the European Union, aid donors, investors as well. So certainly it wants to send a very positive signal that it's putting up a professional and serious front, and it wants to ensure that they enter into dialogue in a very constructive way with all these stakeholders. So certainly they're trying to protect investor sentiment and also gain legitimacy in the eyes of the international community.
And given the importance of the mining industry in the country, what are the long-term implications of the coup on the Guinean economy?
So it's very interesting because assuming that the talks that are taking place over the next couple of weeks go well, and assuming that the new government or the military leadership can demonstrate that it is serious about protecting investors' interests, then the effects will be relatively limited over the sort of next couple of years. However, in our view, there will be at least some disruption to the economy for the rest of this year, potentially into next year. And this is because any coup will generate uncertainty. There will already have been some withdrawal of foreign direct investment from some companies that are uncertain about the outlook for Guinea. And we are also expecting some reduction in aid inflows and donor support for Guinea as a result of the coup. So even in the best case scenario, we could see a bit of an economic slowdown through the rest of this year. In the long term, it really hinges on how serious the government is about protecting investor interests. And this is because mining, especially bauxite mining, is incredibly important for the economy. And the thing about bauxite, which goes into aluminium, which is the raw material for aluminium production, is that there are plenty of other resources globally. So aluminium companies, mining companies, have quite a lot of bargaining power over the Guinean government. So certainly it really does depend on how serious the new government is about protecting investor interests over the long term.
And kind of a bit scary, this is the third coup in West Africa this year alone. Are we seeing an erosion of democracy across the region?
It's a question that has cropped up a lot since the coup. So we've seen the attempted coups in Mali, in Niger, and the successful coup in Mali this year. So both these states, Mali and Niger, and Guinea to an extent, are relatively fragile states in the Sahel. And the coup illustrates that very fact, that they are quite fragile. These are countries, well, more so Niger and Mali, these are countries that are experiencing their own domestic security crises. They have quite weak economies. And these are environments that are not particularly conducive to supporting institutions or helping institutions that protect democracy. The situation is very different in other parts of West Africa. So I don't think we could apply the same trend, or I would not say that the same trend applies to other countries, especially Nigeria, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Senegal, for example. There are concerns about rising authoritarianism in countries like Cote d'Ivoire, Cameroon, Senegal, for example. But the trends that are driving that those concerns are very different to those that we're seeing in Mali, Niger, and Guinea, for example. And when you look at a country like Ghana, democracy is very much alive and well in that country. So I would say the Sahelian countries are more vulnerable to democratic backsliding, whereas in other West African markets, it's a different and a more complicated picture.
All right, well, that's good to know. A bit of comfort there. Thank you so much, Matt, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, you too.
So in the latest health entry and stay condition for travelers update, South Africa is removed from Seychelles' list of restricted countries, which means that passengers from South Africa, vaccinated or not, will be allowed entry into the islands without need for quarantine. According to the advisory, entry and stay condition will not be affected by COVID-19 vaccination status, but visitors are strongly encouraged to be fully immunized before travel. Passengers will need to provide proof of a negative COVID-19 PCR test done 72 hours of departure and complete a health travel authorization. They will also need to provide proof of valid travel and health insurance to cover COVID-19 related quarantine, isolation or treatment. Condition for stay for children up to age 17, regardless of their vaccination status, will be as for the parent or guardian they are accompanying. And Tanzania will host the first East African Regional Tourism Expo in October. The Tourism Expo will be held in the Northern Tourist Circuit of Arusha from the 9th of October to the 16th. The expo, which is the first of its kind to be held in the region, is aimed at promoting tourism attractions available in Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi and South Sudan. The expo will be held on a rotational basis among EAC member states, with this year's theme titled Promoting Resilient Tourism for Inclusive Socio-Economic Development. And Zimbabwe and Rwanda partners in capacity building initiatives and technical exchange programs in transport infrastructure development. The cooperation has had representatives of both countries signing agreements. One of such agreements was signed between the National Railways of Zimbabwe and Rwanda Transport Development Agency, setting a framework for exchange projects and railway development programs between the two countries. Well, that is for the program today. Thank you so much for being a part of it. I'm Ini John Mekwa.